Welcome to Season 2 of the To Health With That podcast, where we break up big health topics into small bites. I'm Amy, and this season I'll share all the tips, tricks, and hacks you need to get healthy with an MTHFR mutation in a step-by-step, week-by-week process. I can't wait. Good morning. So I would like to welcome Tricia Nelson to the show, and I'm so excited to be talking with Tricia. So Tricia has lost 50 pounds by identifying and healing the underlying causes of her own emotional eating. So I know MTHFR folks, this is a bit of a diversion, but remember that MTHFR does decrease your neurotransmitters, and anybody with lower dopamine, so that's MTHFR folks, or people with COMT fast or MAO fast, that's all of us, basically. All of us are prone to these low dopamine problems, which is emotional eating, addictive behavior, and emotional eating can be considered kind of an addictive behavior. So Tricia has spent over 30 years researching the hidden causes of the addictive personality. Right? She became an emotional eating expert and is the author of the #1 best-selling book, Heal Your Hunger: 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. So I am so excited to welcome Tricia.
Thanks for having me.
It's so exciting to talk to you. I mean, it really, this is great. This is great. I'm really looking forward to it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey? Because it sounds like you've had quite a journey.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. It's a journey. So anybody who struggles, I think, with food, knows it as a journey for sure, especially if it is a chronic problem. I started out, Amy, at a very young age, just really loving food and loving how it soothed me. And I love to eat. I love to cook. I love to, go out to dinner. That was a big highlight for me. So anything around food is a big deal for me. And that wouldn't have been so bad, but I put on weight really easily. And in my adolescence, I really blew up like a balloon and my face was like round like a pumpkin. And I had this roll in my tummy. I was just looking at pictures actually yesterday. It's old pictures. And I had this roll. I'm like, yep, there's the roll. So I had this roll in my tummy that I would scrunch up in my hands. Imagine cutting off, like you cut fat off the side of a steak. And so I know, isn't that terrible? And then I thought about like getting some disease where I'd automatically lose weight without having to, diet. And so it was really a desperate feeling that I had where I just hated my body. I hated my weight. And I was obsessed with food. So, I mean, I did diets. I mean, the first thing you do when you feel out of control is you're like, I'm going to go on a diet. So, and when you go on a diet, or any plan, you feel all excited. I call it new diet syndrome. It's like, I'm doing it. Woo! Here we go, and you feel great for a little while. And then it gets hard, it gets hard and it's drudgery and all you want is to eat chocolate, like you just give me my food. And so that's how it would always go for me. I was usually around 2 weeks, as long as I could last. And so after a while, of yo-yoing, I was a yo-yo dieter. So I'd be like up 30, down 20, up 10. And I had several sizes of pants in my closet because I never knew what size I'd be. And so after a while, I just got so discouraged, because I tried so many things, so many diets and pills and potions and lotions, I like to call it, and 12-step programs. And I even went to an eating disorders therapist for about a year, twice a week. So I was no slouch. I was really going for it. And nothing really changed with my eating. And I felt so frustrated. So I was blessed to meet somebody who is a spiritual healer who had been obese and really showed me how to heal. And this was a totally different experience. It was really, instead of focusing on the symptom of food and weight, we were really going deeper and dealing with the underlying causes. And that changed everything for me, and my relationship with food leveled out and I was able to lose the weight and keep it off. And that's been several decades now. And what I started to do was help my mentor, I sort of assisted him in helping others. And literally my whole life, I've been helping emotional eaters to heal. And 5 years ago, I founded my company, Heal Your Hunger. And I primarily help women to overcome emotional eating. And they don't have to be obese, to have that problem at all. It's really this feeling out of control with food. But thankfully, I really codified what I did, and what I know from all my years of work has proven that there is a step-by-step process for overcoming emotional eating. So I take the guesswork out of it for people, and it's really a beautiful thing. I feel very grateful to be able to do this work.
It's amazing, and I feel like in that moment, right? In that moment when you feel just out of control, there's such a helplessness, right? Like this feeling just, you cannot get your hands around it. You cannot reach out. And I think a lot of people in my community can identify with that, because largely when they find out about MTHFR, there is this just like overwhelming helplessness, and having a process to fall back on, having somebody who says, no, there's a map, right? I can show you how to walk through this.
Yeah.
It's gold. I mean, it really is invaluable to have that, right? To know that there is a system.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
I'm grateful, because when there is a system, the good thing, I mean, healing from emotional eating isn't it's not a one-way street. You kind of do great, and then there's little bumps in the road, because you're basically changing a lifelong addictive habit, so it doesn't happen overnight. But what people learn is that when they follow, my clients will follow the path. And if they get a bump in the road, they can look and see, okay, what part of this path did I veer from, and then I get right back to that. And then it's, they get on track, and it's so nice.
Right. Well, and health is never, I mean, it's not linear.
Yeah.
I wish I could say, like you follow the process and it's one way and it's all
never going back.
No, that's not how it goes. That's not how it goes. So, I mean, that's also really important to have that dynamic system where they can actually like physically take a look and be like, okay, where did I go wrong? Because that's so difficult, right? Like with health, there's so many moving pieces. So, how do you pinpoint that, like, eek, this was the thing?
Yeah. It's a journey. It is a journey.
So can you tell me a little bit about the process? Like, what do you feel is the really root of it?
Well, I like to start people off, because a lot of times, when I first heard the term emotional eating, I rejected it. And I thought, that's ridiculous. I just like food. So I was like, that's not me. No way. And I hear people say that, like, I don't think I'm an emotional eater, but you can't unhear this information, which is why I'm glad you have me on the show. So once you hear it, it sort of seeps into your consciousness, and you start to see it in your life. So that's what happened for me. I started to observe my behaviors. I'm like, oh, like I'm eating when I'm not hungry. I'm eating more than I really probably than my body needs, or I'm eating foods that I know will make me feel sick, but I want them. So I'm eating them anyway. And so you start observing your behaviors. You're like, that's not normal. Like, that's not, it's not healthy. And so what I like to do when people are like, oh, like, I don't do that, I like to give them something called the Pep Test, which is a way to just start kind of seeing what are the emotions underneath this. What is emotional eating? So the PEP is an acronym, PEP. And the first P, this is basically a way, instead of looking at what foods are doing to us, which we do know what they do to us, they make us feel bad and gain weight and, have foggy brain. But instead of looking at what they're doing to us, I like to have people kind of do a little pivot and look at what it's doing for us. Okay, because we use food for emotional reasons. So the PEP is a great place to start. And the first P in PEP stands for painkiller. Okay, so we use food as a painkiller to kill emotions, painful emotions, and everybody does it to some degree, perhaps,
Oh, yeah, I've had some of that pasta. Right
yeah, and so you're like, you're feeling too much. Life is too much. You just want to soften the edges of life. And so we use food for that reason. We also use food as a form of escape. And I basically would do this all the time. I would get my favorite binge foods and sit in front of the television, and I'd be like, I just want the world to go away. Like just get away from it all. And food is a great way to do that, especially the carbs and the sugar. That's what I always tended to eat. And so that escape is really from, worry, from a racing mind, from fear. My experience is that overeaters tend to be overthinkers. So we sort of think and think and think and rethink, and so
Oh, you're speaking language.
so we kind of need to get out of our heads. Like, we just literally want to escape our own minds. And it works for a little bit of time, comes back. But the last P in PEP stands for punishment, which seems counterintuitive because we use food as a reward. But if somebody's like me and goes overboard and feels stuffed and mad at themselves and has all these self-recriminating thoughts, and the next day you cancel appointments because you've got puffy face, that's not really a reward, right? Like, there's something else going on there. Like, why would we do that to ourselves? Like, why would we eat to excess to where we feel sick, or try to make ourselves sick, or then do crazy things, jog, 5 miles, 3 days in a row? It's like we do all very self-punishment behaviors. And so it begs the question, why is that? And as overeaters, we tend to be overfeelers, and we feel guilty about everything. It's really hard to let it go. So, so we end up beating ourselves up with food, and it really, if somebody goes too far, they know what I'm talking about. It just feels bad, but we do it to ourselves. So this is just a way, the PEP test, the painkiller, escape, and punishment. Amy, this is just a way for people to start kind of tuning into the fact that there is more to it than I just like chocolate.
So I want to take the PEP test. Where do I go for this?
It's in my book. So, yep, it's in my book. And it's just it's really just sort of what you do is when the best way is when, like, I'm thinking, oh, I'm so hungry. And then I stop and I ask myself, really, like, what's going on? And then I dig a little bit deeper and looking at what emotions I might be, stuffing or wanting to distract from. That's a great place to start.
Right. That's fantastic. And I mean, as an overthinker, overfeeler, and emotional stuffer, I'm with you here.
Yeah. I mean, I find that we're all emotional eaters to some degree. I feel like we're hardwired to have an emotional connection with food. Like, it can
Absolutely.
be so soothing, right? So I really tell people it's really a spectrum. You're somewhere on the spectrum, and on the low end is emotional eating, and the high end is food addiction. You mentioned addiction, and I definitely was a food addict. I was so addicted, and part of what an addiction is, in the classic terminology, is you do it in spite of negative consequences. And certainly there are so many negative consequences to eating sugar and carbs all day. So and in spite of what the doctor tells us or what our practitioner, warns us against, we're doing it again. It's like, eat this diet, and you'll feel better. And we go and eat the stuff we're not supposed to eat, that's not on the diet. And it's like, what is going on? And it's so frustrating because we do know better. It's not like we're ignorant, right? We know better, but we can't do better. And that lack of being able to do better really is the crux of the problem. It's like we all want so much more knowledge, but the knowledge won't get us where we need to go necessarily. It's this piece that's missing so often, which is how my emotions are driving my behaviors. But I do have a quiz, speaking of that spectrum, I do have a quiz on my website, a free quiz, which people can take and find out where they are on the emotional eating spectrum, whether an emotional eater or food addict or somewhere in between.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
And your website again is healyourhunger.com. So people can
Correct.
go to healyourhunger.com and find this quiz about their own emotional eating style.
Yeah.
Correct? Oh, that
Correct.
sounds exciting. Okay, so that just yeah, once we get off where I'm doing that. Yeah, it's really it's so interesting because I think, you know, like you said, to some degree, every human can identify with that sense of wanting the comfort of food. And I mean, I joke about it all the time, but COVID baking was a thing in my house, right?
Oh yeah.
We bought, like, okay, so I'm gluten free and have been for over a decade, you know, in part because of the MTHFR thing, but in part just because I'm sensitive to it. But we actually in my household bought the 10-kilo bag of flour, regular flour, not even gluten-free flour.
Wow.
It was a
Somebody was doing
thing.
some bacon.
Yeah, seriously. But I mean, it really, to me, was this fascinating human study where it was like, okay, times are
Yeah.
troublesome. This is what I'm going to do. This is my response. I'm making more,
Oh,
you know?
oh, everybody. I mean, the pandemic, none of us had any rule book on how to deal with the pandemic, and everybody was freaking out and stockpiling food. And, you know, the fear was high. And I had friends who always were like, oh, emotional eating, whatever, you know, and then they're calling me and they're like, Tricia, I'm an emotional eater.
Right,
Like all of a
exactly.
sudden they're figuring it out, you know?
I have 10 kilos of pastry flour. Help. That's exactly it. I mean, it really is kind of this universal response to stressful times, to hard times, to difficult emotions, right?
Yeah.
And for those people who are 100% emotionally integrated and have no skeletons in their closet, I mean, yay, they're probably, you know, doing a
Who's
different
that?
thing. But for the rest of us, it's difficult.
It's so true.
And so what, you know, with this journey, you mentioned working with a spiritual healer. And
Mhm.
that's, I think, a different path than most people are used to taking, you know, for something that seems as cut and dry as like, this is what I eat.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that for you. I mean, what do you feel like that really, you know, it sounds like that uncovered some underlying things.
Well, yes. I mean, what it did for me is that, you know, I had things I wasn't able to see in myself.
Mhm.
I had blocks, you know, I had denial. And so when I started to take a spiritual path, and I don't mean religious, I just mean kind of seeking a deeper meaning to life, you know, and maybe a sense of a higher power that might feel comforting to me. I grew up religious and it didn't really speak to me. So, so what happened was my path was really so much more about who I was as a person and what pain I had buried. And when I felt more spiritually connected, when I started to meditate, when I started a prayer practice, doing spiritual readings, first of all, they gave me such comfort. You know, you can't just stop overeating in a vacuum. Like you can't just take away all your sugar and carbs and goodies and expect to be happy, because those foods are serving, like I said, they're serving a very important function in your life. And the reason why 98% of all diets fail is if you take those foods away, it's like, oh, just this is your diet now. It includes nothing that you're used to enjoying eating. You're going to be so barren and so devoid of what you depend on for coping with life. You know, I mean, food was my main coping skill in my life. I used it when I was happy, when I was sad, when I was upset, when I was joyous. You know, it just
Right.
depressed. It was my primary comforter. And if you take that away from me, I'm not going to last long. You know, that's why I had about a 2-week window where I could be on this diet roll. And then I just was falling flat on my face. I'm like, I need my food back. And so if we don't find healthier coping tools, we will always revert back to the food. And this is why, you know, that is a dismal statistic, 95 to 98% of diets failing, because people just treat the symptom, but not the underlying issues. So I had to, in order to go deeper, I had to find new coping skills, something else to lean on. So my meditation, my prayer, my reading, my writing, walking in nature, these things nourished me. They fed my soul, and there were things I could depend on when life got tough instead of turning to food. And if I have to have those tools in my toolkit, otherwise I'm right there with the food again. And I'm not cured. I mean, if I don't keep doing the things I teach others to do, I'll be eating too. So, but anyway, back to your question, my mentor kind of helped me get a meditation practice that I have to this day, 34 years later. I meditate daily because it gives me so much emotional balance and grounding and spiritual connection. It just feeds my soul, and we have to find new ways to feed our soul. And then that gave me the strength to deal with stuff from my past that was very troubling. I had sexual abuse in my past, and I had blocked it out for a long time. Tried to deal with it in therapy, didn't get very far because I didn't have the right environment inside of myself to really deal with that. So so I went, it was more of a personal journey of writing and crying and just looking, like peering beneath the surface of my food addiction. And that is a journey, and I tell that to my clients too, like it really is a journey. And it's not a one and done. It's like we are exploring, we're basically building a relationship with ourselves, and food, the beautiful thing about food, which feels like a curse, but the thing about food is you have to eat, you have to eat. And so as much as we want to be able to just be done with it, people are like, God, I just don't want to deal with food. And that's why I think intermittent fasting has become so popular, is people who are compelled to eat, they do feel out of control. At least when they're out of the kitchen for 16 hours, it's like 16 hours of relief, from that driving compulsion. I say there's a better way. You can have that compulsion removed. You don't have to starve yourself to be free from it. You can be in the kitchen and be at peace, and that's really an important message, I think. But the bottom line is, it's really about making peace with ourselves, and in there it's both. It's like you eat in a way that's peaceful in order to be able to start seeing things inside yourself, but the more things you see and deal with inside yourself, the more peaceful you are around food.
Right, that makes sense. And I think you've brought up a really important point here, which is that self-medicating is, for most people, one of their most valuable coping skills, right? And it is, we have to look at it as medicating, right? They are medicating a problem. And so if you take that away, there has to be something else there. There has to be another way to catch that problem. And just trying to take away a medication without catching the problem doesn't work, right? And that's really important to acknowledge, right? Because self-medicating, it can be food, it can be
addiction. There's a million things we can use.
Drugs, it can be alcohol, it can be shopping, of course, it can be gaming, it can be gambling, it can be any of these behaviors, right? And a lot of times even it's self-improvement, right? Like it's, I've seen a lot of people who are genuinely addicted to this idea of making themselves better, right? And they get satisfaction from that. And it becomes a way of avoiding, ironically, the things that they really need to do, the work that they really need to do, and the things they need to look at. So, it's being a human, it's complicated.
It's we all get points for just being here.
Right, exactly. I think that's how it goes, right? Kudos to all of us. Put in front of the other.
Yep.
So if you had any advice for somebody who's just maybe beginning to recognize this as a factor that they need to look at in their lives, what would it be?
I would say slow down. Overeaters tend to be overdoers, and we're in a lot of fear, and fear and disconnection from ourselves and from God, from our spiritual source. And so when we're afraid, we do, we sort of feel like doing is going to be the solution. And I will say that sometimes it's just the opposite, you know, and when we get more into being instead of doing, we can find love instead of fear. So I really, you know, emotional eaters are afraid of their feelings. They're afraid of being present with their feelings. So they're on this hamster wheel all the time. And part of it comes from needing validation from what we do. You know, my experience is when I didn't have a strong sense of myself as a child, you know, I lacked self-esteem. So like accolades that I got and positions that I held in school and, you know, in work, these things sort of became my identity. But they're really a mask for that emptiness that I had inside and that lack of self-esteem. And so it's really important that I slow down and catch up to myself. And, you know, it's hard to do alone. You know, I do all my work in groups because the support of each other, you know, seeing and hearing other people's experiences is so powerful. And it gives us juice to be able to keep, you know, fighting the good fight and learning about ourselves, because we're very afraid to slow down, very afraid to be with ourselves. But in that busyness is sickness. You know, the busier we are, the less self-care we have and the sicker we get. So just looking at one's calendar, like, where can I delegate? Where can I ask for help? Oh, asking for help is so hard for emotional eaters, right? For women, you know, it's just hard in our culture in general. We're such a do-it-yourself thing, you know, kind of culture. But this is, you know, no addiction is going to be overcome alone. You cannot be an island and heal. Like, we all need each other, and there's incredible healing power in connecting at the heart level. So slowing down, reaching out for help, stop beating yourself up because you don't have it together. You know, this is an addiction over which you couldn't possibly have control. So don't keep, you know, shooting on yourself and telling yourself you should be able to, you know, figure this out or whatever. If you could have, you probably would have. So reach out for help. There's no shame in that whatsoever. You know, we don't think twice about hiring a trainer when we want to get, you know, super buff, or, you know, we want to train for a marathon or something. Like, we get help. You know, Serena Williams, I mean, Djokovic, they have at least one coach, if not two, so they can be at the top of their game. You know, and I say it's no different with our relationship with food. This is something that's complicated. It runs deep, you know, so don't think you're going to figure it out on your own, because if you could have, you probably would have.
Yeah. And I think, you know, that it's really, it's a profound idea to think that that these behaviors are so linked together, right? Like that overdoing and, you know, self-reliance and the, you know, looking, you know, achievement, blah, 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 is really linked to this sort of hollow self, right? And this part of yourself that you really can't heal. And I think that's really hard. I mean, it's hard for me to hear because I'm very much a doer, right? Much to my family's dismay, because I'm always like, no, I've got 18 things still on today's to-do list, right? Can't not do. So, you know, it's a different way of looking at a trait that can be considered highly valuable, right? Our culture loves doers. Our culture loves achievers. And so taking a step back and saying, wait a minute, is this actually healthy doing, or is it unhealthy doing? Is really an important question, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's really, we can't avoid ourselves forever, you know, or if we do, you know, it'll come at a very high price. And my experience is emotional eating is the price we pay for avoiding ourselves.
That's fantastic. So let's wrap this up on that note, because I feel like we're not going to get another, you know, high point like that. Emotional eating is the price we pay, right? Dun, dun, dun.
But there's hope. There's hope. That's the highest note of all. There's a lot of hope, and people who suffer from this can overcome it.
There is hope, and that's huge, right? And I feel like, you know, I hope this has given some people a moment to pause and think about whether or not their eating and their emotions are independent from each other. Because I'm guessing the answer there is no, they're not. But also to think about, you know, in what way they're self-medicating, because we all do. And to some degree that's normal and human, but then to what degree is it not, right?
Yeah. Well, if it's hurting you in any way, it's time to take a look.
Yes. So to take a deeper look, check out healyourhunger.com or the book Heal Your Hunger: 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. Tricia, I can't thank you enough. This has been an absolute delight.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for playing with me and being so interested in this topic so you can serve more people. I appreciate you and the beautiful work you do.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm hoping we'll get to talk again.
Yes, I would love that.
Okay. Thank you, Tricia.
Thank you.